So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to cover a very, very important verse. And this verse is it's paramount for us as Muslims in this society, intra-personally, intra-faith. When we talk about within the Muslim Ummah, not even looking outside of the Muslim Ummah, when we think about the things that can affect the community and definitely cause separation within the community, this is definitely one of those subject matters that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to address here, as all of them were. But this one, subhanAllah, is beautiful because of the way that it is addressed, because here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives an order and He tells you the reason for one of His actions. And this is in Arabic what is called the illah, or it is called the effective reasoning behind something. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't tell us all the time why He legislates a thing a certain way. Why did He legislate 5? One can maybe guess that, okay, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned washing in a river 5 times a day. This is a means of purification. But one could ask, why not 12? Why not 10? Why not in the middle of the night? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not always disclose to us His reasoning behind legislation in the way that He has legislated. And that is what makes Him Al-Majid, the majestic. That is what makes Him Al-Alim, the all-knowing, to remind you that you have no ultimate knowledge. And with that reality, it is a test for you as a human being to see that if you're going to obey Allah unconditionally, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one that is worshipped, and based on that, and from that worship is to obey Him unconditionally. When we mean unconditionally, it is not you're not putting a stipulation upon your obedience. And sometimes we may put that stipulation of understanding the reasoning behind the legislation. And if we don't understand it, or if it quote unquote does not make sense to us, we may be lenient in following Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it very clear that this is not a sign of the one that has true iman. The one that has true faith is the one that voluntarily worships and obeys Allah without any strings attached, without any condition, because you are aware of who He is and His qualities and His capabilities, His power, His might, His knowledge, His wisdom, His greatness, His strength, and all of that knowledge that you obtain, whether through experience or whether through gaining through reading, that this is something that strengthens your iman, and as a result, it makes you a mu'min or a muhsin. So when seeing here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in verse number 13, when He talks about creation. Now, one of His names being the Creator. Who knows what that name is in Arabic? Al-Khaliq. Very good. Naam. Al-Khaliq. Al-Khaliq. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, basically, this verse is a manifestation of that name being Al-Khaliq. Okay? So if we can have someone read the Arabic, inshallah. Who can read the Arabic verse of the verse? Bukhari, you able to read it? The Arabic portion? Okay, in English? Who can read it first in Arabic first? Amuri, hold on. Good, Ahsan. Thank Bukhari. Now, so here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala firstly is saying, Ya ayyuhan nas. And this was slightly different from the other calls, because before He was saying, Ya ayyu what? Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. So some mention that this is a call for all of mankind to remind them of something that is of a universal factor for them to remember. So this is a very beautiful verse of when one wants to, whether they're at an interfaith gathering or they're at work and they want to mention a message of the Quran, What is a general message of Islam? What is Islam's position regarding different nationalities, different cultures? What is Islam's position regarding racism, stereotypes, discrimination? This verse is jami'atun mani'a. This verse is very comprehensive in explaining that. So firstly, he says, O mankind, we have created you from male and female and made you into nations and tribes. So the first thing is he says, O mankind, we have created you. So he acknowledges that he has created mankind. And this is an establishment already that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. And there's a small point we want to make here, is that mankind does not create anything. Did y'all get that? Mankind only manipulates forms of creation. Mankind takes what is already present and uses it to make something else. Paper is made from trees. A tree is made from a seed. Mankind does not bring something out of nothing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one that can bring something out of nothing. Does everyone understand that? Mankind only takes things that are already present and uses it and transforms it into something else. Allah is the creator, and the creator is ja'ala shay min adam. He makes something when it wasn't present in existence. It didn't exist. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings it into existence. And when we say it, we can mean the bare essentials, elements of that thing. So that is what is really meant by al-Khaliq. So here he says, we have created you. You going back to mankind. From male and female. Okay? The male primarily is who? Adam. And the female is? Who? Eve. Hawa. Right? And all of mankind, Muslim, non-Muslim, were created from male and female. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is firstly acknowledging that. Then he says, وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ, and we made you nations and tribes. There's male and there's female. They intertwine with one another and they procreate. They have children. Then a nation forms. So that is shurub, a shab, a nation of people. وَقَبَائِل are like sub-nations. So you have a general group of people, and from these groups of people, based on their needs and their localities, what they may need, and their grandfathers, whatever the case may be, they split off into smaller tribes. So you have a bigger element, and then this big class of people, and from that splits tribes. So there's more of the specific mentioned after the generality. So the qabila is smaller than the shab. Okay? The qabila is smaller than the shab. So the shab here, he said, we made you nations and tribes so that you may get to know each other. So the reason Allah made us and created us different is for a reason. To understand each other, in order to establish relationships, to acknowledge and accept diversity. This is the reason. So it is a knowledge that Allah has given us, but how do we use it? Right? So that is the ultimate reason, for us to get to know one another. And subhanAllah, you see Islam within this jama'ah here, we at least have 5 different nationalities. 5 different nationalities. So for us to get to know one another, take the time after the salah to get to talk to someone, sometimes we may say a certain dish that we have, or, it's a holiday, in my country, or in my country we do this. Maybe even have gatherings to where, one person presents something that takes place in their country, and mentioning something that's historical of the reason why. I remember one time we were talking about, one of the last names of someone, and it was very interesting when you learn the history of that last name. I never knew this. And subhanAllah, I know within the Indo-Pak tribe, there's the Mammon, right? There's the Mammon and the, what's the other one? It's the Mammon and there's 2 other tribes. There's 2 main tribes, the Mammon and I can't remember. They told me the Mammon tribe is mainly like the businessman tribe. Maimon, yes, the Maimon. There's the Maimon and there's I can't remember the other one, excuse me, I'm sorry. It's slipping my mind now, But just when I was learning that, subhanAllah, that was very, very interesting. Very, very interesting to learn that history. And it's rich. This is rich history. Because because of the struggles of one man or one woman that carried on from time to time and was inherited therefore obtaining a last name, to where that last name lives on for generations of people. That is huge. That's something to be proud of. Because of the struggles of one person, whether they fought for rights, whether they established, had some kind of establishment in their locality. You know, that is huge, because that is, it reminds you of the struggles of someone that fought for justice, or someone that fought for the rights of people, or someone that protected their people, which is huge and which is even Islamic. So when we look at that, subhanAllah, that is why in Islam it is impermissible to eliminate to associate, they say a nasab, to maintain the family structure, maintaining the lineage, not to cut yourself off from your family. This is a major sin. The Prophet ﷺ said, "La yadkhulu jannata aaq," that the person does not enter the Jannah, the person that is an aaq, that is disobedient, or that cuts off relations from their family, Keeping the family name is something that is very, very Islamic, and it's an Islamic objective from what is called hifdhun nasab, maintenance of the lineage, preserving the lineage of the people. Even when the Prophet ﷺ adopted Zayd, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reprimanded and mentioned that no, they should be associated with their fathers. Instead of being called the son of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that he should be named after his father, not Zayd and Muhammad, rather Zayd, the son of his father. Okay, so it's very important that one maintains the lineage, or maintaining the names of their fathers is something that is an Islamic characteristic. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, we made you nations and tribes for you to get to know one another. And after that he says, "Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum," and the most noble amongst you, or excuse me, the most honorable amongst you is those who has the most taqwa. Okay, so we see that noble or being honorable is a sign of taqwa, and taqwa again is the goal, brothers and sisters. Taqwa is the goal from the actions that we perform, and taqwa is doing the actions of obedience and staying away from the actions of disobedience to the best of your ability. So throughout this process of getting to know one another, throughout this process of understanding one another, of maybe not understanding and accepting the fact that we may have made assumptions about one another, throughout this act of these assumptions may be leading to discrimination or a stereotype, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is well aware of that. That's why he says, the most honorable amongst you is the one that has the most taqwa. When you know that something you may have said or something that you may have done could have been something that is an element of separating a community, of making an assumption about those kinds of people, or that tribe, or that last name, or that country. When someone does that, it can definitely separate a community. And we see this a lot of times when, whenever I mention this to the younger generation, young professionals, when you mention the word marriage, the eyes, they start to light, the eyebrows start to get higher, or they start to laugh. Because that is when true colors come out. When people want to mention, oh, you're marrying from this tribe, or you're marrying from this people, can't you find someone else? Why? Well, marrying from these people, they are this or they are that. Right? That is when the true colors come out. And that's where we put this verse against that. Now, there is nothing wrong if a mother or father wishes that their son or daughter marry from the same tribe. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But when they make it, if the person from that tribe or that person that they have in mind is someone that does not do actions of taqwa, and they prefer someone that may be out of that tribe, and they have actions of taqwa, they may come to the masjid, they may pray, they may be someone that wants to be a better individual, they're not violent, whatever the case may be, and your determining factor is the last name, that's where it can be problematic. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says here, the most noble amongst you is the one that has the most piety. And he is showing here that throughout this process, we will make mistakes. But remember, the one who is the best, it is not determined on your skin color, the shade of your color, your last name. It is the taqwa, which is the litmus test of those who are the best. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala concludes by saying, Inna Allaha alimun khabirun. Now remember, when we said Allah mentions the names at the end, whenever He mentions names at the end of a verse, what did we say? When He mentions names at the end of the verse, that means it's an opportunity for you to do what? Okay, but no. Yes, so the general rule, though, is whenever we see names at the end of a verse, we should look at the context of the verse, because the names will be associated with the context, and that will help magnify and glorify the names. So what you all did is the next step. Exactly. Just like you mentioned. So He knows what's in your heart, whether you display it or not. He has all knowledge of the tribes. He has all knowledge of who is better and who is not. And He is well acquainted with what you do and what you say. He is well acquainted with what you do and what you say. In regards to this topic of Him creating you for you to get to know one another, He's well aware that if you're just putting on a show, He's well aware what's in your heart in regards to another nation or another people. He's well aware of that. Regardless of what you do, He's well aware of what's in your heart. So there's ilm and there's khibra. There's knowledge and there's being well acquainted, knowing the reality. He knows the reality and He's well acquainted with that. It's not something new for Him. So when we look at this beautiful verse, brothers and sisters, this verse, as I mentioned, is an umda. It is a general rule for us to remember when it comes to our differences as Muslims from the way that we look and the way that we act based on our cultures. It is important to remember that Allah just put this into existence for us to get to know one another and appreciate one another. And for us to generalize the specific by generalizing our culture over every other culture, and to make that the default within a place such as in America and such as a masjid, that is where it can become problematic for those minority cultures. And they can sometimes feel invisibilized and otherized because they are not acknowledged or they are totally disenfranchised. So it's important for us to have knowledge of each other, and with this knowledge, allowing this knowledge to make us appreciate one another. And that appreciation of one another is what will bring the hearts together. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those that appreciate one another based on the knowledge that we have of each other. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to alleviate any hardships or any ill feelings or evil feelings that we have in our hearts towards one another. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those that make the effort to get to know one another for the purpose of appreciating one another. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that throughout this process of any ignorance that may emanate from us, that He forgive us of any of our shortcomings, and He makes us of those of repentance, redemption, and of the muttaqeen, and of people of mercy and love and honor. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه الأخيار.